Ever wonder why your water propagations always fail? Then this video is for you. As you can see, I'm starting a new format in which you ask questions and I'm here to answer them. So if you have any plant-related questions, please let me know in the comments or on Instagram, or send me an email or a pigeon, whatever you like, and I'll make sure to make a video about it and explain pretty much the best I can. So I got this question on Instagram. My cuttings always rot. Do you have any suggestions to help them not rot and keep them alive? Well, yeah, I have about 9 of them. Number 1, I think that a lot of people, maybe not intentionally, but they forget about this, and this is pretty important. You are not sanitizing your scissors, or maybe you're using the same scissors to propagate different plants without sanitizing them beforehand. If your scissors are rusty and not in top shape, maybe that's a problem as well for your rotting cuttings. So remember, always sanitize your scissors before cutting a plant. This will minimize the spread of bacteria and it will increase your chances of successful propagations. Reason number 2, you are not changing the water frequently. If you take fresh cuttings and place them in water, you need to change the water at least once a week. If you have rooted cuttings already, maybe even more than once a week. And if you have a plant that you're trying to save from root rot, you kind of need to change the water every day because that plant has a lot of bacteria and the water could go bad pretty quickly. Also, don't use warm water for your cuttings. That's a no-no. Always go with the colder setting for your tap water. I usually like to mix tap water with filtered water for my plants, so maybe if that helps, you could try that. Moving on to reason number 3. You place too many cuttings in the same jar. Maybe that's not very obvious for a lot of people, but once your roots develop and maybe you have like 6 cuttings in the same jar and your jar is pretty small, your water will run out of oxygen pretty soon and your roots need oxygen to develop. So as you can see, I have 1 single cutting in a single glass. You can go with 3 or 4, but please be mindful that if you have a lot of cuttings in a single jar, you need to change the water more frequently. So if you forget to change it, you'll be safer with just 1 or 2 cuttings in a single jar. Okay, reason number 4. You are mixing fresh cuttings with old cuttings or sick cuttings. If you have new cuttings and you place them in the same jar with the old cuttings, especially if the old cuttings had problems before, the bacteria from the old cuttings could spread to the new ones and then your propagation is doomed again. Which leads me to reason number 5. Cuttings that rotted before need to be placed individually in water. Let's say you catch a cold. You isolate yourself in your room so you don't infect others. Well, it's kind of the same principle. If you have 2 cuttings with problems, place them in separate jars because one may survive and the other one may be a goner. And if you place them together, your success rates drop. Moving on to reason number 6. You didn't cut all the rot before placing your cutting in water, if that makes sense. Let's say you want to save a plant with root rot. I have the perfect example. This is a cutting that was successfully saved from root rot. If you have a stem that is rotting, don't cut just a tiny bit. I cut a big portion of your stem and cut some nodes as well if it's possible until your plant is fully healthy and you have a healthy cutting. Because if you didn't clean the rot 100%, your cutting again is doomed to rot even further. Also, as a bonus, if you have some hydrogen peroxide in your home, it's great to spray your cutting because in this way you will sanitize it and you have better chances of rooting that cutting again. Because you can see in my cutting I have just a tiny bit of rot, but I managed to grow healthy roots again because I wasn't afraid to cut a big portion of the stem in order to save the plant. Reason number 7. You are letting your leaves submerge in water. Leaves are very quick to rot and I would not advise you to leave them underwater. Just the parts that grow roots should be underwater. And for most plants, those are just the stem and the nodes. I mean the stem because the stem has the nodes. Leaves need that air and the light to help the plant develop overall, so don't leave them underwater. Moving on to reason number 8. Your humidity is crazy high, or maybe worse, you missed your cuttings. Water propagations don't need misting. Of course, that's a different story if we're talking about soil propagations that maybe need a zip bag or a mini greenhouse or what else, but that in another video. Your cuttings are not capable to absorb a lot of water. because the roots are still developing, you know, and the shorter they are, the less capable of absorbing water they are as well. So if you missed your plant and maybe your house lacks ventilation, or maybe you have a cooler home, or maybe it's winter and the temperatures are cooler in general, that water will stay on the plant a bit longer than it's necessary, and it will lead to spreading bacteria and rotting. So don't miss your cuttings. And reason number 9, the last one, which may seem pretty obvious for some people, but for beginners maybe not that obvious. You don't have the right cutting. And what do I mean by the right cutting? Maybe you cut a leaf instead of a stem with a node for a pothos, for example. I experimented with that at some point, and I had a leaf that grew roots, but nothing else. It eventually died because it didn't have a node, and if you don't have a node, you don't have new growth. That's a reason. Another one is that maybe your node is spent. If your node is spent, the auxiliary bud on the node is pretty much destroyed. It's gone. It doesn't exist. If you don't have an auxiliary bud on the node, unfortunately for a lot of plants, you can't see that auxiliary bud very well. But if you don't have that in your node, your propagation will not be successful. The auxiliary bud is the one that will produce the new growth. And unfortunately, there is nothing you can do about it. So let's just call it bad luck. Or maybe in some plants, maybe some philodendrons, your aerial roots are pretty much damaged or destroyed, like in this one. If the aerial roots in your plant are dried out, you can tell after a few weeks that they will not help with developing future roots. And that could lower your chances for success. But in some cases, the auxiliary bud will develop. And when new growth comes up, you will see tiny roots developing from that auxiliary bud. So if you don't see any roots developing in the first couple of weeks, but you see the auxiliary bud activated, wait some more, change the water, because your propagation may not be 100% doomed. And that's pretty much it with the video. Also, if you gained some value from this video, I would pretty much appreciate if you smash that like button and subscribe, you know, for future informative, high quality videos. And other than that, don't forget to take care of yourself and your plants.